Welcome to Austin Liti Limits, a series where authors talk to authors about books and writing. I'm Scott Immigrant.
And I'm Larry Brill. You know, Scott and I have had our share of successes.
And awards.
His last novel, To Squeeze a Prairie Dog, won 3 book awards. His latest novel, The Benevolent Lords of Sometimes Island, has been getting great reviews.
Larry has won his share of awards too. His latest book is out now, The Printer and the Strumpet. Here at Austin Liti Limits, we're working with our good friends at Book People to introduce readers to our favorite authors.
Well, naturally, during these days of pandemic, we've had to move our author interviews online until the bookstore is up and running again 100%.
In this episode, I had a chance to talk with fiercely independent author Brian Kindall.
Brian grew up in a small town 30 miles outside of Boise, Idaho, a town he describes as straight out of the movie The Last Picture Show. He's a recovering English major and a former whitewater raft guide living in the mountains of central Idaho, with books ranging in diversity from middle grade novels to adult fiction full of insight and a great deal of twisted humor. Delivering Virtue was a finalist for the Forward Review's Literary Novel of the Year and has received awards from Awesome Indies and the Historical Novel Society. His latest, Escape from Oblivia, continues his success, and trust me, midlife crisis has never been this funny.
How's it going, Brian?
Good.
So you and I have actually talked quite a bit, but this is the first time we've spoken face to face.
First time I've heard your voice, directed at me. Letters. Yeah.
Excellent. And we've both read a few of each other's books.
Yeah,
enjoy them.
Enjoyed your books immensely, yes. I recommend them to people all the time.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. Thanks for being on the show. Tell us about your new book, Escape from Oblivia. What are you hoping to accomplish with this new one?
Yeah, well, Escape from Oblivia is the story of a man who's feeling emasculated and bored with the banality of his daily life, who longs for adventure, a manly adventure, and gets much more than he bargained for when his dreams start coming true. So that's it, simply put.
You know,
I had a lot of things in mind with it. I wanted to, I was kind of, first and foremost, write a great story, something that's engaging and entertaining, humorous. But I also, it explores sexism a little bit, hopefully as in a humorous way, but it can be a little bit in your face, I guess, at times. But that, it's been in the news so much in the last couple of years, and I just kind of was asking myself the questions: where did this come from? What's going on here in our culture? What's in me in regards to this, and where is it going? And then I started exploring 1950s men's adventure novels, kind of looking at those covers. And in fact, here is Escape from Oblivia, and ultimately the book becomes as wild as the cover suggests. But those kinds of covers, scantily clad women and heroic men. And anyway, I was interested in that, and I wanted to write in that style. The entire book isn't written in that way, but parts of it are. And those old 1950s pulp men's adventure magazines, there was a lot of sexism and just overt sexism. And I also wanted to write something a little bit experimental. Why I wanted to do all of these things, I don't really know, except those are the balls I threw up in the air when I started. And I feel like I succeeded, at least by my standards.
Right. Yeah, recently we watched the Indiana Jones movies with the kids, right? And even though that's also a homage, I mean, they were done in the 80s for based on serials that were done in the 30s and 40s. There was still some of that overt kind of sexism in there.
Yeah, you realize, I mean, I look at my childhood and I mean, I'm astounded. I didn't notice it as a kid, but I realized what was happening in the news, television commercials. I mean, it still happens, but anyway, it's interesting looking back and a little bit terrifying.
Right. I've spoken to other authors about this too. I had an interview with James Wade. He writes Westerns. He explores masculinity as well. And we had talked about it. That's something that I explored in my new book, The Benevolent Lords of Sometimes Island, of what constitutes manliness, a boy being considered strong.
Right.
How does friendship work into that?
Right.
So I definitely think it's a very curious thing to explore.
Yeah, definitely.
So you and I were kind of introduced. Well, actually, I reached out to you because a couple of years ago, I became very curious about other indie authors. And the reason being was that a book of mine had won an award, and I saw a couple other indie authors pop up. We were kind of on the similar stratosphere in independent publishing as far as being recognized. And I had realized that I hadn't really read a lot of other independent authors and kind of dove into some books. You were one, Cell Ray Bob was one, my colleague, Larry Brill.
Right.
And I got really excited to discover other writers who were top-notch, putting out really high-quality books. How did your journey in independent publishing begin?
Well, I've been writing forever. I mean, literally since I was a 10-year-old kid. And I was an English major. I did all of those things, but eventually it started feeling like, I wanted to put things out in the public. I also dabbled in film. I went to film school for a while, and it just came to a point where it was time to get these books out there. So I went through the process, started courting agents, just like everybody does, went through that long project, finally found somebody who was interested in what I was doing, and started the back and forth, and was feeling pretty good about it, but there was this little niggling in the back of my mind that maybe this isn't the guy in this. And it's a real relationship with an agent. And I was feeling like maybe we weren't such a match. But then he started asking me essentially to sterilize a lot of my writing. An agent is trying to sell a book to a publisher, and a publisher is trying to sell a book to as many people as they possibly can. And so to do that, you have to write sort of a general book in a lot of ways. It's hard if you're doing anything edgy, anything slightly original, to fit that mold. And so I decided, my wife Kristen, and I have to tell you right now that she is the brains of our outfit, Diving Boy Books. She does I write the books, and she does everything else: the websites, contacts, editors, cover design, just everything. I write the books. She passes things by me, but she writes a lot of copy, everything. So it's a teamwork thing. I'm not sure that I would be independent without her. But anyway, the thing we like about independent writing or independent publishing is that you get to call all the shots. You're also responsible for all the mistakes you make, but it's very satisfying, and it's a complete experience. You're not turning your work over to someone else, and it completely suits my personality. We like to be involved in everything, every single decision along the way, and it just appeals to me. It's a lot more work, I think, ultimately, because you do everything. My wife is on the computer daily for hours, working on things, editing, fixing typos that slipped by, and things like that. So it's a lot of work, but I think ultimately it might be more rewarding, and it lets you be the artist you want to be, uncompromising.
Right. So ultimately, you're a publisher on top of being a writer.
Yeah, and the writing part's actually the easy part in many
right.
ways. Or at least I don't pull my hair out as much when what's left of my hair from just writing. It's the publishing stuff where we run into the problems. And Kristen, my wife, is brilliant at figuring everything out. So
Right. And I guess that was the epiphany that I had when I discovered your books and Larry Brill and Cell Ray Bob and also J.R. Archuleta. These are folks that I found, and they are not as well as you are not what people the typical self-published author, right? Where you write something, you upload a Word document, you put it out there, and then you call it a book.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah, self-publishing was a dirty word for a long time, and
right,
I totally believe that. But we call it independent publishing,
right,
and hopefully that lends it a little more credibility. There are a lot of gatekeepers that weren't there when self-publishing first started. You know, you have to be the cream that rises to the top for sure. There's any monkey with a typewriter can publish a book, but
sure.
to write something of worth, you know, that takes a little. It's hard, but
Right.
it's the way to go.
And I definitely understand your process because it sounds like we're in the similar boat. I hire a graphic designer, I hire an editor. My wife also helps me. She's my first reader. She's one of my editors. She took my author photo because she's a professional photographer.
Right.
And we do take on that role of we're publishers as well. We're hiring people to help us, who when there's areas we can't do ourselves,
Right.
and try to put out the highest quality book. And I think that's
Yeah.
where we kind of get above the typical.
Hiring professionals every step of the way, and you know, not letting things pass by. Don't there's the old murder your darlings saying, and it's kind of, you know, you have to be hard-hearted. You write the book, you pour your soul into it, you know, it means so much to you. It's, you know, it's this gush of emotion, or, you know, it's your soul. And yet when it's done, if you're going to present that to the world, you have to package it so that the world can digest it. And you have to be hard on yourself. You have to say, you know, this isn't working, no matter how much you love a certain cover or, you know, a blurb or just any number of things. So yeah, it's quite a process, and you have to be very honest with yourself. I think you have to be hard-hearted with yourself.
Right. I think you have to have the entrepreneurial spirit, right, of
Yeah,
wanting to
and
take on those other roles because it's
right.
difficult.
I would say my wife has that more than I do. She's brilliant at that. I love writing. I would probably write books and throw them in the closet for years, and
Right.
but she's the one who makes it actually come out.
So I have an English degree as well. Where did you get your English degree?
University of Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, up in North. My oldest son Jack is up there right now, his first year, and proud father that I am, he's an English major. So
Nice. Chip
I don't
off
know
the
if that
old
was a
block.
good influence or bad influence. He's also very into French and languages. But
Excellent. Yeah, I
yeah,
got my degree at the University of Texas, and then my oldest child is at University of North Texas studying art right now. So I think I
okay,
also
great.
chip off the old block.
Yeah, good. It feels good, doesn't it?
It does. So the
Yeah.
novel that I came into the world of Brian Kindall was Delivering Virtue. It's a novel that I love very much. Did you carefully plan this novel, or and also did you think it was going to be a series at first, or was it just going to be a one-off? Tell me a little bit about Didier Rain and
Yeah. So
the origins of that.
I had written a couple of middle grade novels, and I was ready to write something adult. I sat down one morning. I just was casting about, writing, thinking, and then I was basically taken over by the spirit of Didier Rain, and I wrote. And after about an hour, I had the first chapter, and I reread it, and I just thought, this is a really interesting guy, really interesting voice, and it almost felt like I was on a job interview in a way. It was like Didier Rain was saying, "Do you want the job of writing my story?" So yeah, I said, yeah, this looks interesting. I did not plot that novel at all. It just came out, and it's in the style of a picaresque, which is kind of a plotless form anyway, but it's also a road trip, and those lend themselves to just one thing after the next. So you know where it starts. I knew where it was going. I knew his destination, and it was pretty much just a matter of piling up adventures as along the way. And yeah, that was probably the fastest, easiest book I've ever written. It was a real just go. And I had no idea it was a series, going to be part of a series. It was a one-off in my mind up until I read it after completing it. And then I thought, he's not done. This is not it. So I've written the second book, Fortuna and the Scapegrace, has been out for a couple of years. And I'm in the middle right now of writing the third one. And I foresee 5 total. I'm trying to write other things in between. But yeah, it's interesting that these later ones are more plotted. They're not as picaresque style, maybe, but I had no idea where it was going that morning, and it turned out to be quite an adventure and one of the greatest writing adventures I've ever had. Really enjoyable.
When did the magical realism aspect of that story come in? Because I remember thinking when it first started, it's kind of like a Western. Definitely, it's going to be an adventure story. I remember first realizing that the personification of the animals seemed just like that. But then after a while, they started to take on their own personalities. And then when the child started growing faster than usual. So is that something that you realized when you were writing it, or did you think, well, I'm going to make this an unusual, magical, realistic type story?
Yeah, well, it has elements of fable to it, and that the animals they don't necessarily speak. We're seeing the book is in first person, and so a large part of the theme in the books throughout, is this tension between the sacred and the profane, sort of the elevated parts of being a human and the base elements. And so we're seeing these animals through DDA Rain's eyes. It's subjective, and so they may have a lot of those characteristics. They're courageous, heroic, brave, intelligent, all the things that DDA Rain would like to be, but isn't when he resorts to his animal's side. So in a lot of ways, they're projections. And then as far as the magical realism, it just sort of evolved. I really believe that life is magical, and that there's a magic under the surface of things that we just are oblivious to. There's the cold hard reality, but then there's something going on, and I think some plan unseen beyond science even. And I'm not necessarily religious in that sense, but it just feels like there's a mystery, at least to be beyond my comprehension. And I think DDA Rain, he's a great example of somebody who's oblivious to that. It's happening right in front of him. These, his animal friends are, more human than he is in many ways. And Virtue,
more decent, right?
Yeah, Virtue is, she's obviously some sort of an angel, but he's so caught up in his task and his own drama that he doesn't even necessarily seem to notice that she's growing from an infant to a young woman, all in the course of this journey. So, yeah, I really appreciate magical realism. I don't care for fantasy, but I think magical realism, I wrote in one of my blog posts a couple back, was called Magical Realism is Realism. And I think that's actually how the world works. There's a magic, we're just not seeing it. So that's kind of it wasn't necessarily deliberate. It sort of arose from the writing process.
Right. I definitely think that too. I also think that dreams play a lot into that as well. And I've talked to other writers about using dreams as a narrative strategy and what that means. And I think that there's definitely a magical element to that, where some people think they're nonsense, but
I think that's kind of the magical side, communicating with the hard reality side. A lot of times that's a great place to,
right,
where the two brush up against each other.
Well, you write middle grade and adult books, and so that's two totally different audiences. So what have you discovered in trying to find paths to those two different audiences?
Yeah, in many ways, I regret doing it because it jerks us in so many different directions. And I honestly don't put as much energy into the middle grade books as I probably should. They get kind of pushed to the side. I actually have a middle grade book that I'm going to put out here in a couple of months, and maybe that'll put some new energy into that. I write with the middle grade books. I like to write those just classically told sort of magical stories, pretty simple. And it all came about from when my kids were little, and I remember reading Stuart Little. I had been a highbrow English major and only read sophisticated things, and I started reading Little Fur Family and Stuart Little, and I started thinking, oh my gosh, these are better than adult books.
Right.
And good writing is good writing, and I became fascinated with it. As far as marketing them, it's two entirely different directions. With middle grade books, you're still at the age where the kids aren't buying the books, the parents are. So you're having to put the books in front of parents, um, and appeal to their sensibilities, appeal to what they want their kids to be reading in many ways. So that's definitely different than adult books, where you're trying to appeal to the directly to the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting if you read books by Roald Dahl or C.S. Lewis and you realize, that they're just such great books that, anybody can enjoy them, although they are kind of geared toward younger
Yeah, and
readers.
a lot of times, I would say my middle grade books are called, what, like cross books, or they can be. I get comments all the time where adults can enjoy this book as well.
Yeah, my colleague Larry Brill, I joke with him that, when I first met him, his book, Deja Vu All Over Again, was not, he didn't consider it a romance book. And when we became friends and started talking, and I had read that book and enjoyed it very much, he thinks of it as a humor book. And I told him, I said, this book's a romance. And he said, no, it's not. I didn't write it that way. And I said, but the guy gets the girl at the end. That's one of the things that makes a romance, is that there's a happy ending. And so as a lark, he had submitted that book to the Benjamin Franklin Awards in the romance category, and he won the gold medal. He
Well,
won
that's the
the gold
thing.
medal for romance.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it's really hard to see your own stuff objectively, and that's a
right.
great example of that for sure.
Mm-hmm. And your new book, Escape to Oblivia, reminds me a lot of Larry's book. So you guys should read each other's work.
Yeah,
So,
he's actually on my list, but
right.
I'm always looking for indie authors, so I will
Right.
get to
Your character Will and his character Nate they're very similar.
cool.
So anyway, so here's the time in the show where we do the lightning round. It is a concept we stole from inside the actor's studio, but it's not theirs. They stole it from Bernard Pivot, who stole it from Marcel Proust, and it goes on and on and on. So Brian Kindall, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, bring it on.
All right. What's your favorite word?
Visceral, that
That's a good
gut
one.
feeling, definitely.
What is your least favorite word?
I always wince when I hear someone say the word utilize. Just seems wrong somehow.
Right. What turns you on?
I like more than anything in the world to hike to the top of a mountain and fly off of it with my paraglider. And if I'm not actually doing that, I'm probably dreaming about doing that's the biggest thrill in my life.
It sounds so fun. What turned you off?
Politics.
Ditto. What is your idea of happiness?
I think COVID might have changed that for me a little bit, caused me to reassess. But I would say now happiness is being with my wife, Kristen, our kids, and my grandson, Ren. It doesn't matter what we're doing. If we're all together and safe, that seems to me like happiness.
That sounds pretty good. Who is your favorite author besides Scott Semigran?
Dang, that's the one I was going to say. But runner up, honestly, Scott, that is the toughest question because I'm fickle. Tolstoy one day, Patricia Highsmith the next. I really love A Sport and a Pastime by James Salter. Um, you know, I there's no way I can answer that because today I'll say something and tomorrow it'll be something different.
No, I understand. I understand. So if you could be a character from a well-known novel, who would you be?
I think that's probably a toss-up between Huckleberry Finn and Tarzan. Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good combination. All right. What profession other than your own would you want to attempt?
Bush pilot, probably in Alaska.
Hmm. Okay. What profession would you least want to do?
President of the United States.
You are the third person to say that.
Yeah, it doesn't come recommended lately.
No. Okay, final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you reach the check-in desk?
I would like him to say, "Welcome, Brian. So glad to finally meet you. Loved your last book. I'm your biggest fan."
Excellent. Brian Kindall, thank you very much for being on our show, and good luck to you with your new book.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it.